Okay, Bobby. I know there's at least one person who's interested. I was going to wait until 10 o'clock to start so I didn't disturb people sleeping from a hard week. But it's almost 9:30. It's about 9:22 here in Pacific time. And I know you're probably back east. So now is as good a time to start as any, I suppose. I was hoping to get a little more prepared. Um, Maybe look my best, but I'll get out of courtesy, the time considerations that other people may have, I'll get started. Um, when a person is very sick, sometimes it's best to avoid the topic of what's ailing them, especially if it's terminal. But avoidance of very serious sickness in a dress can also cause greater complications when it's curable. Our society is facing a similar situation, asking ourselves, how bad is it? Should we give up? We should not give up. It's very bad, but it's not yet mortal. My diagnosis is Hollywood. Hollywood has been allowed to abstract into a realm that's so separate from our reality that we see it as a surrogate place to live in our imaginations, and we stop developing our civics properly. And I believe this is an intention of Hollywood. And I've gone into Hollywood studies in other videos. I found 4 elements of international semiotics. When the curtain closed on World War II, it opened back up on a secret attempt by the Axis to subvert our society. Those 4 elements were the escape of Hitler, the punishment of JFK over Hiroshima, 2 virgins' moral ball, clocked to the AIDS attack, and Lenin's Houdini. Keep in mind that Houdini himself was a protege of Theodore Roosevelt when Theodore Roosevelt was president of the United States. Lenin's Houdini allows us to see things like what they did with the White Album when they celebrated Kennedy's assassination. It was released November 22nd, 1968, after Revolution Number 9 had cut down Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. That song is followed, What Did You Kill song has celebration, was followed by blood-curdling mourning, resemblant of Ruby Tuesday by the Rolling Stones, and probably a tribute to Jacqueline Onassis. Remember on Sgt. Pepper's where he said, I just had to laugh, half. He's signifying half. They're going half. See, what they did was they sent out a signal back in the USSR, and they flooded our society with poisons from the Prison Corrections Administration. You are your own punishment. They gave, Jimmy Carrere wanted to be like John Lennon. Well, let's talk about that. A man named Karsh came over to my house. He was after Todd had introduced me to Governor Milton Schaap. And I was answerable to someone named Elizabeth Blumenfeld. And then there was Gellamini, so Blumeanies, right? So you have Gail Burson from the Neva Corporation coming and attacking me in Fulton Elementary School with a butcher shop of gangsters who were mobilized by the Pittsburgh police and this prison authority system. Widemaker, who designed the nerve poison, was an Attica State prison warden. So the idea that you get, well, Karsh came over and he was 3 years older than me and he blew marijuana smoke at me. And of course the Beatles were laughing and saying, let's get high, let's get high. So Jimmy tried it, discovered it was, a casual inebriation. And all the older kids were doing it over and over again, but it fed right back. Elizabeth learned about it, Milton Schaap learned about it, and it was all punishment craze. Some of these people working with Soviet Jewry and the USSR KGB to chastise American society. His name was even Widemaker, and I was a little boy from the U.S. Navy. His father's life was probably saved by the little boy bomb. So the structuralist aspect of this mentality views human beings as things. That's one of the reasons why I have advised strongly this community of Strongsville, Ohio, to look into the fact that Mackenzie Shirilla was certainly poisoned and regarded as a thing. So whether America is in power or poor slobs struggling, we have the obligation to understand the world around us. We have the right to understand the world around us. People in hybrid media are functioning as folkways shakedown artists anymore. I promised to discuss my father, but I want to make sure you understand that my father stood for human rights and civil rights, public education, that he was also a white patriarch, so he could be made into a voodoo doll by Bush, who despised him as a liberal, who was from the same ship in the Navy, so they made me into the white voodoo doll. They poisoned me with a nerve agent, they poisoned me in the stomach, they poisoned me in the neurological system, they poisoned me in the mouth. They've left signifiers of their intent to poison. They were talking last night in Wire Club about heart poison, and I'll get to how they justify that. But the Bush voodoo doll comes down the highway with Duvall from the NAACP in Pittsburgh, who said, "I know Bush started AIDS and I support him for it." It's important to understand the context in which I'm making these remarks. Now, this tape is primarily organized around the death of my father in Maui and a comparison between these things. My father, there's an interesting speculation, particularly since he was at Pitt, was himself possibly in the CIA, donated his son the way that Abraham was called to, or the way his only begotten son stuff. It's possible that my father was in on this backstab of public education and was role playing. There's a lot of contrary indications, but there seems to be a theme of consistency about it. One of his favorite laughs was to say, "Let's not," and say, "We did." When you say he didn't want to go to a movie, he said, "You want to go to a movie?" And he'll say, "Let's not," and say, "We did." That means no. But that's the whole issue of the rescue of Hitler and the semiotics and Lenin's Houdini. So it does have to be taken seriously. That my father, but why would they kill him? Why would Tive show up on his deathbed after he publishes a book about George Leader, of all things, and then put a bat in his bed and poison him in the pancreas? Well, this sort of Goblin show would consider it friendly fire, a sacrifice. He got a visit from Gerald Ford before it happened. And of course, my name is Jimmy C., like Carter. I was attacked by Ronnie and Casper in the playing game called I Am the Walrus. Maui has similar questions about it because we know that Brecker is there, and he was certainly in on the idea of Gail Burston. He certainly maneuvered the whole thing with the Neva Corporation. He was certainly working with Shiono. But why would they create a maelstrom of fire to punish their own allies? It doesn't seem to make any sense. Well, they're conjurers. They're spiteful people. They believe in sacrifice. It's the sort of thing that happened with the Polish resistance when Stalin just said, "Oh, let them resist and burn themselves out. I'm tired of whatever," he said. He didn't rescue the Polish resistance. It's just caused a lot of enmity. But these people are expendable. They're just things. Greg Carl wrote The Structuralist Approach to Musical Analysis and told me human beings are just things. It serves a purpose, for example, in the word game over Midori Goto, for Windsor to have the claim that Princess Diana was killed by the opposition. See, when it happened, I came home from Mount Desert Island. John Hines was killed. And it looked like the New Jersey Secret Service. Some guy came over to me and said, from the Edgar Snyder crowd, ever played royalty. And then Princess Diana was killed. And it gave Ringo the upper hand. Ringo was encouraging these people from Edgar Snyder. gave him the upper hand. He had what they were calling a barrier of blood between me and Midori. It was really obnoxious. It was a two virgins pussy ball operation, but she was the perpetrator of the whole thing. We now know from the Telltale script. Well, the point is that they create a chessboard situation for a mania to abstract away from actually looking at who is poisoning children, who is attacking, doing our duty to our communities, to our public schools, to our civics. Instead, we get lost in this Hollywood funhouse thing that's going on. I mean, God bless Princess Diana and all that. But whatever happened to her, I don't happen to think that Windsor did kill her. I'm not saying that I think that that's what happened, but it would serve their purpose. And so whatever happened was in tune with serving their purpose. I mean, Phoenix Gabriel's constantly talking about how he hedges his bets. And that's a gross indication of what happens when you mingle. There's no such thing as friendly fascism. Now, Guyana, and the people are going to have their say no matter what. Guyana was on TikTok saying slavery was the greatest indignity of the beneficiaries of slavery, you white. The point is that Israeli has stories about their ancestors too. I mean, and they have a special relationship with Bush, and they go smashing Middle Eastern countries who are Arabic without regard to age, sex, gender, having ever done us anything wrong because of this ancestor worship thing that we give Israel the right to rob our museums about. Totaled me as a child through the prison corrections. Karsh was Jewish. Wattenmaker was Jewish. Guyana factually who these people are up in Maine are the people who were behind the AIDS attack. So we're going to give reparations to people who were privy. And Duvall was in the NAACP. I don't think it's washing your hands to say enough of this reparation stuff, because we have to work person to person with people within our strategic limitations. We have to limit what we can do. Now they come out and say, stop us from raping at the rape tree. Well, flooding the countries with ammunition and firepower is not going to stop rape at the rape tree. It's going to make it worse. Teaching in dignity and teaching about how to outcast, how it feels to be marginalized, are the ways to stop rape at the rape tree. And they still want to say that pornography is evil. Well, these people were behind pornography. The evil elements, the rape trees and pornography are there doing. The first thing to do is to humanize pornography, send people who are Upton Sinclairs into it to make it sensible. Now, you cannot get judicial help for consequences of wrongs you commit, they say. You will not get judicial help for consequences of wrongs you commit. Who committed the wrong when they poisoned a child with a nerve age from corrections? They beat my brains in and forced me to do this stuff. And the Beatles were saying, yeah. And we like it, it's fun, and could have saved John Lennon when this evidence shows he pulled a Houdini with the help of Her Majesty's government and Russia. And Biden has a shutdown all his own. He says that telling the truth about Reagan and Lennon is adding insult to injury because they were the ones who got zinged, right? Well, the evidence shows that they weren't, that it was a Hollywood plan. It was Pentagon Disney at work, giving them that alibi. And their friends in North Korea just love it because it's now illegal to tell the truth in America. They will give you an open heart surgery to cry about queer ball. And the way they monitor this, they had overdubbed people like Ming No Wen. They were talking about forces impinging on the persona's experience. They had a nerve agent that was so brutal that it shook me down, where I had no control, and my soul conscience was retching out from inside of me, was how I put it as a 14-year-old. Talk about struggling with words. And they give it this veneer of police legitimacy by Robert Fripp's Conjuring Act Virginity proves rape. How does virginity prove rape? Well, it's a loop-de-doop. You put in for the insane asylum and they go drooling crazy about it. So they get a veneer of police legitimate on a cradle-to-grave pornography show they're calling The Walrus. And the pornography system is a CIA systematic. They brought it to a forcing edge where they say, we will inject you with HIV if you go near anyone else, ever. And they're talking about doing it anyway. I mean, I've lived ever since AIDS started with the threat to inject me. And they say I'm being paranoid. You tried to pull away. You tried to pull away. And then they released COVID and said 6 feet apart or 6 feet under. Like my facial nerve. Something I never did, never knew anything about was what they call facial. Erotic art from Japan. You have this ejaculating on a woman's face. I think it's beautiful personally, but that's what they did to my facial nerve. That's why they did it. Because they're incendiary haters who believe that the blaze from the ashes, even if you incinerate the world, it will come back because of the grace of Allah. And they don't care who they hurt, they don't care who they do wrong. They say that as much. And they argue from fluxes of Holocaust survivors, spare me, just spare me, they say, sarcastically. And this is supposedly a debt to the ancestors that we're supposed to pay back. And it is a CIA systematic. They invaded our homes, they're clocking everything, they're playing Peep in your home computer. Oh, do they play Peep? And they normalize defamation of character. To them, it's not. They go around calling somebody who was tortured, implying that I'm a pedo through talking sideways with their forked tongues, when they were the ones who were CIA administering a brutal, violent gang attack on our public schools in the city of Pittsburgh. And then they say, oh, they sent a billionaire Russian, Putin is one of the richest people in the world, to say he's going to make money and incite street crime about it. You know, so I mean, it's pretty despicable, syndicated operation that should not be allowed to get the better of our social history or truth.